Thanks, David. Yes, we are very pleased to have our own Mahree Skala speak to us today. Mahree is a retired public health worker. She worked both as an epidemiologist and an administrator who has been an active community volunteer for the last 20 years or so. Excuse me. She is the immediate past president of the League of Women Voters of Columbia, Boone County. The League is a nonprofit organization that studies issues and adopts positions that drive member advocacy. Mahree serves as the legislative advocacy team leader for Columbia Boone County League. Team members commit to contacting legislators about pending bills using weekly legislative bulletins from the League of Women Voters of Missouri. Welcome, Mahree.
Thank you very much. And I apologize for the technical difficulties. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes, you sound fine. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this and wish I had better news to bring, but what I'm going to focus on is the process by which the League of Women Voters actually tracks legislation and encourages our members to intervene. And then I'm also going to talk about specific legislation that's making its way through the Missouri legislature. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about the SAVE Act and issues with that. But first of all, I have to say that the League is a nonpartisan organization, but we do issue advocacy. In other words, we don't support political candidates or parties, but we do have a firm base in studying issues, developing policy positions, and then asking our members to act on those. And of course, the main focus of this talk is going to be legislation that will impact voting and or the initiative petition process. But we do track a wide variety of legislation, including that related to reproductive health and social welfare bills like Prop A, or the ones that would impact Prop A, gun safety, education, just a very wide portfolio there. And the way we do this, I think, is kind of neat. It's all done on a volunteer basis. We have no paid staff involved in it. But at the beginning of the Missouri legislative session, a team is formed. It's led by the League in Kansas City, actually, because they started this process several years ago. But they recruit a team of people to track legislation on various specific topics that those people are interested in, and develop a list of bills of interest, which is updated on a weekly basis. And so they put out a legislative bulletin once a week saying, these are the things we have our eye on, these are the actions that have taken place. And they also put out a document called Calls to Action. And that gives very specific time, place, and person information and suggested talking points about whatever bills are going to be acted upon, whether that be a committee hearing or executive session of a committee or floor debate, whatever it might be, whatever's going to be coming up during the coming week. And that goes out on Sunday night. We have a team of 24 people in our local league who've all asked to receive that information and to made a commitment to act on it by following up with the legislative contacts that are suggested. So that's how this information comes through. And we have 3 members of our local league who are actively involved in the committee that actually identifies the legislation and develops the calls to action. So does anybody have questions about that part before I go on? It's pretty straightforward. Just to share some facts about the legislative session, and I may be telling you guys stuff you already know, but I just feel like it's important to sort of review the basics. There are an incredible number of bills filed. The bill filing starts in the December 1st, before the legislative session is even convened. And this year, the number of House bills is over 1,600, and in the Senate, over 900 bills were were filed. So there's obviously a great sifting process that goes on, and they have until May the 16th to pass legislation. So the session runs from early January through May the 16th, with only 1 week off for spring break. The number of bills that have actually been what's called truly agreed and finally passed by both houses, where they've agreed on language and the same language has been passed by both houses, amounts. Anybody want to guess how many have passed so far this session out of the almost 3,000 filed? David says 2. He's not far off. 7. Yeah, 7. So it seems to have devolved to a process where there's a great flurry of action at the end of the session. But realistically, if they pass 50 to 75 bills beyond, in addition to the budget bills, which they're constitutionally required to pass, if they reach that number, they consider themselves productive for that year. But part of the reason I wanted to emphasize the sheer number of bills, an amount of information, is that we need to remember when we're contacting our elected officials, be that our own legislators or legislators who are on a committee that's hearing a particular bill we're interested in, to bear in mind, do not assume they are familiar with the bill that you care about and want to communicate with them about, because it's like drinking from a fire hose. And I think we heard this pretty directly from Kathy Steinhoff when she spoke earlier, that she's on the budget committee. And so when they're doing their work, which is right up until a week before the session ends, that is pretty much all consuming. And she certainly can't know about every one of these other bills on other topics on committees that she's not on until they get to the floor for a debate and vote. And so what we want to do is make sure that our elected officials are aware of these bills, what they would do, and know how we feel about whether we support or oppose them. So each member of our legislative advocacy team speaks for themselves only. Only the president of the state league can speak for the league on these matters, but we're contacting people as an individual constituent, or many times we're encouraging people to contact legislators who are not your own legislator. You're not a constituent, you're not in their district, because they serve on a committee that's going to be hearing an important bill. And sometimes they'll get back and say, well, what are you, kind of politely say, well, what business is it of yours? And I've just developed a standard response that says, this is a statewide piece of legislation that will affect every part of our state, including where I live. You are on the committee that's considering the legislation. That's why I contacted you. But I've only had that kind of pushback. I mean, they may ignore me, but I've only had that kind of pushback 3 times. And it was polite, staffer email kind of thing. So I'm going to start off with the really bad news. And some of you have probably read about this. It was in the Missouri Independent, and it was kind of in some of the other news yesterday, that the governor has now signed Senate Bill 22. Senate Bill 22 adds a whole lot of restrictions to the initiative petition process. And if allowed to stand as worded, it will pretty much kill our chances of ever having a progressive initiative petition pass again, and could spoil previous ones. So by way of explanation, what this bill does, there's a whole process for, how the steps have to occur. You collect signatures, and this is mostly about the development of the ballot language. So what it does is strip the courts of their ability to rewrite unfair or biased ballot language. And it does that not by saying they absolutely cannot rewrite the language, But by putting so many steps in the process and procedures and giving so much power to the elected Secretary of State, whoever that is at the time, that the court's role is minimized in the whole process. So basically, when you turn in a petition, the Secretary of State writes ballot language. This law will increase the number of words that can be in that ballot language up to 100 from what is a limit of currently 50. So it gives them more words to work with. But in the current process, if he writes something, he or she, maybe we'll have one again in the future, writes language that is believed to be biased or unfair, or simply doesn't reflect the actual content of the initiative, then interested parties can take that to court. And now with this bill, with this law in place, they can do that, but the court cannot rewrite the language. All they can do is send it back to the Secretary of State and say, try again. They have to do that 3 times before the court can actually develop fair, unbiased language. And that all has to be done on a timeline, which this bill shortens by 2 weeks. So we have 2 weeks less to go through the process of rewriting the ballot language than before this bill, and many more steps to go through. And the bill does not specify how quickly the Secretary of State has to respond with new language. So it just will have the deterrent effect of, if allowed to stand, it will have the deterrent effect of keeping petitions completely off the ballot because they missed the deadline, or of having the Secretary of State's language prevail. And we know from past experience that that can be extremely biased and unfair and insufficient in describing what the measure actually does. So the other thing that this act does, which just is almost mind-boggling to me, is that it stipulates that, well, let me say the one good thing about it first, before I get to the very worst thing. I think this was due to the intervention of our senator. Actually, he played a lead role in it. The act does stipulate that once the Secretary of State certifies the official ballot title, signatures may be collected, even if the ballot title is subject to action in court challenging the wording. So once he certifies an official ballot title, one could at least collect signatures, and they won't be thrown out if the language changes. I mean, that's small consolation, because if you're collecting signatures using the official ballot title, it may say black is white, or zebras have spots or something, completely not reflecting the reality of what it is. And then finally, this act allows the Attorney General to appeal a preliminary injunction in which the state or state official is preliminarily enjoined from implementing, enforcing, or otherwise effectuating any provision of the Constitution or of Missouri statute or regulation. The Attorney General may appeal any preliminary injunction that existed prior to August 28th, 2025. So it makes the Attorney General's ability to fight preliminary injunctions retroactive. And guess what he's going to fight first? The ruling on it that has allowed abortion to restart in our state. And I'm sure he won't lose any time in doing that. So first of all, this is the most constitutionally suspect part of the whole bill. I mean, the rest of it is probably not constitutional either, but there may be arguments on both sides. But this thing about retroactive appeals of injunctions that were issued before the law passed just will obviously be challenged in court. as will, I'm sure, some of the other provisions. But it's a sad day for Missouri when this passed. I mean, it is going to make it monumentally more difficult to pass initiative, and it also will make it monumentally easier for the legislature to put initiatives on the ballot with very misleading information attached to it. So, and they do plan to do that. I mean, I'm kind of getting off the voting focus here, but they do plan to put another initiative on the ballot from the legislature that would rescind the abortion rights that were granted in Amendment 3. And they can word it as misleadingly as they might want to. So if anyone's interested, there is an article in the Missouri Independent that talks a little more about this. It was on April 14th, so you can search for it. But I hate to start with such depressing news, but there it is. That's the world we're living in. Does anybody have questions about that specifically before I move on to some of the other bills that will affect our voting and petitions?
What about the groups that pushed for that particularly? Can you say something about those, Mahree?
That pushed for this law?
Yes.
Yes, the primary proponents were Missouri Right to Life. So, I mean, I think that kind of says the other thing to realize is that the testimony was hugely weighted in favor of those who opposed the bills. So the public testimony did not have much weight, obviously, when you have 2,000 or 3,000 people submitting testimony against it and very few supporting it. But those few were the ones who want to see abortion.
Mahree,
Yes.
Mahree, I have two questions. One I put in the chat. Will this go into effect immediately before it's gone through the court process? But the second one, because you've mentioned this before, what is the distinction between the process between the legislature creating and what they have to go through on a ballot issue versus what we, the public, is? You seem to imply there was a difference.
Yeah, there's a big difference. So your first question was, tell me your first question again.
The first question is, will this go into effect immediately
Oh,
before it
yes.
goes through the courts?
Yes, it had an emergency clause since it's obviously a catastrophic emergency. So it will go into effect immediately. I mean, the governor signed it yesterday, so it's in effect until a restraining order or a preliminary injunction would be handed down by the court, in which case the attorney general can appeal it. So, and going forward, I don't think there would be much question about that. It's just if they try to go backward and appeal a preliminary injunction that was passed months ago or came down months ago, they might be able to contest that. But, and then as far as the difference between the process, the legislature can at any time put a constitutional amendment on the ballot if it passes both houses. They can stipulate the wording that has on the ballot, and not even the governor can veto it. The governor has no say in that process. It's if the House passes it and the Senate passes it, and they outline a bill that requires everybody to eat chocolate ice cream and then dictate that the ballot language is that you have to eat vanilla ice cream, then that fair language could be appealed under this law, but it would go through the route I already explained 3 times back to the Secretary of State before it could be corrected by the court. And
it doesn't seem like they're doing that this session, though. They've got 3 more weeks, or what?
oh yeah, there is a bill. Like I say, I didn't really bone up on everything on all subjects that the league is following, but yes, there is a bill called can't remember if it's House or Senate Joint Resolution 73 that would put abortion back on the ballot with very misleading language and with a clause about foreign contributions to petition campaigns, which is unnecessary. It's already illegal, but it's ballot candy. And it also has very misleading wording on that legislative initiative. It does not ever once mention that it bans abortion. It's the language about protecting women. So that
Okay, thank you.
I would be very surprised if that doesn't make it on to the ballot. So
Wow.
I'm not a bearer of good tidings. In my personal opinion, when Caleb Rowden was in leadership in the House and the Senate, then he obviously exercised much more control over what got through than any of us appreciated, I think. And now that there's new leadership, they're working together very efficiently. They're cruising right by their own party's divisions and getting a lot done this session.
Wow.
So anyway, I'm supposed to be nonpartisan, so I'll shut up. So any other questions about Senate Bill 22? If not, I'll move on to Senate Bill 152. And this is a bill that has passed the Senate and passed out of committee in the House in mid-March. And it creates restrictions and mandates compliance regarding contributions of foreign nationals to Missouri statewide ballot measures. Since that language was incorporated into Senate Bill 22, and many of its other provisions are incorporated into some other bills I'm going to talk about in a minute, it's probably that bill itself is no longer necessary and probably isn't going to go much further. But I did want to bring it up because the talking points on that, it just makes ballot measure campaigns more expensive and more susceptible to the influence of money by increasing the compliance costs, the degree to which you have to go to comply with the new rules about foreign contributions. Their language includes foreign nationals, quote, indirectly influencing a campaign. Now, what the heck does that mean? You know, how will the courts parse out what indirect influence is? And it just seems vague and subject to abuse. And then we have not had on any of these measures that have been on the ballot any evidence of foreign contributions having any material impact on them whatsoever. So our position was that's totally unnecessary, but it's in the law now. I'm sorry, it's not in the law yet. It's in the initiative about abortion that will go on the ballot. So, all right. Then we have a bill that would make it harder for the public to use the initiative petition process. This one was a combination of House Bills 575 and 551, and the latter was filed by our very own John Martin. It imposes restrictions on petition circulators, citizenship requirement, age requirement, who can limit. The league feels that who can circulate petitions, limiting that infringes on the rights of free expression. That's one of our core business as the league is helping to register people to vote and helping people to have access to initiative petitions. And limiting who can circulate those for no discernible reason just infringes on those people's right to free expression to circulate that petition and say, would you please sign this? It repeals the requirement for a public comment period after the Secretary of State certifies signatures, and it shortens, again, even more the time required for a challenge to the official ballot title or fiscal note. So that has passed the House. I'm only telling you about bills that have passed one house or the other at this point in the session. That passed the House on March 27th. It's been referred to a committee in the Senate, but has not received a hearing yet. And I kind of doubt that it will. I think they decided to plant this in the other initiative bill. So let's talk about elections and the proposed changes to our election process. There is a bill called House Bills 126 and 367, which is now being referred to as the Omnibus Elections Bill. And does some good things, actually. It reinstates the presidential primary on the logic, and we support that, on the logic that the presidential primary guarantees a secret ballot. The primaries are run by state and local governments that know what they're doing running elections. The primaries use state-controlled election procedures, and it's a familiar process to voters. So we do weigh in favor of primaries rather than caucuses. So it would reinstate the presidential primary in Missouri, extend the no excuse absentee voting from 2 weeks to 6 weeks before the election. And then there's a bunch of cleanup language from the county clerks, a lot of details that I won't get into, but the one important provision that we have been pushing is criminalizes threatening, pressuring, or doxing election workers. So tries to prevent the harassment of election workers. This bill has passed the House. It was referred only this past week to the Senate Local Government Elections and Pensions Committee, but it hasn't had a hearing scheduled yet. So at this point in the session, it's kind of, I don't know what its chances are, but it's a good bill. It did make it through the House. If it can get heard in the Senate, I think it will pass. Then we have House Bill 507, which is specific to the election worker harassment language. And since that has been incorporated into the bill I just described, this bill is probably not going to go any further. It passed the House, but it's now been combined into that omnibus bill. And that this is part of the challenge of tracking all this stuff, because they they start out with a bill number and then they in committee say, oh, well, that's like this one, and put them together. And then, so anyway, it's a challenge. But another bill that we support, that we would like to see get through, is House Bill 1055, which creates a process for voters to provide missing information on an absentee ballot envelope. Under current law, it is not possible. I mean, if an absentee ballot has a clerical error on whatever you were supposed to fill out on the outside of the envelope, it just gets rejected. And this would allow that ballot to be what they call cured, meaning that the county clerk's office could call the person and say, hey, we got your ballot, but we're not going to be able to count it because of X, Y, or Z. But you can come in anytime between now and the election and fix it. And then your vote will be counted. So, and this bill also repeals, there's currently a 5-day limitation for election authorities to prepare absentee ballots for tabulation. So they may be receiving the absentee ballots for weeks ahead of time and stacking them up in the corner, but they can't like open them, flatten them, vet them, see if they need to be fixed, open them, flatten them out, and get them ready to feed into the counting machine until 5 days before the election. And this bill would remove that and just allow the county clerks to prepare them for tabulation upon receipt. So that would be ready to go. And they don't actually tabulate them till election day. It wouldn't change that. It's just a matter of now they're forbidden from even getting them ready for tabulation. So this one has had a public hearing. that's as far as that's gotten. So it had a hearing in the House Elections Committee. They haven't voted. It was mid-April. They haven't voted on it, and it's probably not going anywhere. Senate Bill 485 moves school board elections to the November general election. This is another one that is passed out of committee in the Senate, hasn't been voted on by the full Senate. No further action since early March, so hopefully it's not going anywhere. But we were concerned about it because it would just introduce a whole new level of fundraising, partisanship, etc., into the school board elections to hold them in November when it might discourage people from running because they would have to compete for the added cost of advertising and competition with all the other candidates that are running for other offices in November. How to communicate with voters when you don't have a very big budget and it's a busy election season where people are being drowned with ads. And then lastly, the school board election would appear at the bottom of the long ballot, and many people don't get all the way down there. I mean, it's a trade-off. Fewer people vote in April elections, but at least the school board candidates can get attention, get their word out. The public can get to know them under the current system. So those are the things that would affect elections. And then there are a couple of bills related to voting rights. And we've been proponents of some of these. There's one that would restore voting rights to people who are on probation or parole. Missouri, unlike some states, does allow felons to vote once they're off of probation or parole, but this bill would move that up to the point at which they are out of custody of the state and would allow. There is some good evidence that shows that people who are able to resume or to start their voting responsibilities when they get out of prison are less likely to reoffend for the reason that they are better integrated into their communities. But anyway, that there was a committee substitute voted do pass on April 2nd, but there hasn't been any further action taken. So that one is probably not going to get out of the legislature. There was a very problematic bill that is kind of moving, at least through the Senate, that originally it's Senate Bill 280, and it originally required the Department of Revenue to determine whether driver's license applicants have, quote, requisite proof of citizenship needed to register to vote before they give them the voter registration form. And that was altered significantly in committee. So now it just stipulates that under current law, Secretary of State and the Director of the Department of Revenue are required to enter into an agreement to match information in their databases. And the law, as it came out of committee in the Senate, would require such an agreement to include information pertaining to citizenship status. Well, I mean, that's better than the way it started. But the fact is, there's no evidence that non-citizens vote in large numbers. It's illegal for them to do so anyway under other law. It's it's unnecessary and would be costly, and there is no agreed upon document. There's no one document that shows that you're a citizen. So how I think the license bureaus pushed back on that one and said, how are we going to enforce this? So I don't think that one's going anywhere. And then There is one, there is a bill in the Senate. It's a combination of three. It started out as three bills, and now it's one Senate committee substitute that would require concurrent initiative petition passage with both a statewide majority and a majority of state House districts. Now, we've heard this refrain before, but what it would do essentially is no matter what the margin was in the state as a whole, unless a particular initiative passed in a majority of state House districts, which, by the way, have been gerrymandered to greatly favor one particular political party, it would not pass. So it also has restrictions on foreign involvement in initiative elections. This is passed out of committee in the Senate, and it's on this calendar to be voted on in the Senate. But again, to think of it getting all the way through the Senate, through the House by the end of the session, it may not. Hopefully, but so it's not a done deal yet. And as far as the talking points that the league has been using, we just say it would create a rule by minority. And there, somebody did the calculations that as few as 20% of voters in the state voting against such an initiative could kill it in this system. So, and we already have prohibition of contributions from foreign sources, so there's no point in that. So at the very least, I think what we're going to end up with is a couple of bad things on the ballot put there by the legislature, and this new law, Senate Bill 22, which has a lot of ramifications. We'll have to see how that goes. Does anybody have any questions about those before we talk about the SAVE Act a little bit? I probably bored you to tears, but I just wanted you to have, even for some of these that aren't moving very much, I just wanted you to be aware of sort of the thought process of our legislature, the things they're considering and hearing in hearings, and how they are approaching some of these issues.
Mahree, I do have a question.
Yeah, Pam.
The one that they're changing so that you can cure the ballot, if the person is unable to come in person, it's still too late. So say a person who lives in a nursing home and is unable to travel to the county clerk's office,
Right.
and they make a mistake on their outside of their ballot, and the county clerk's office calls them and says, if you can come in, we can fix this.
Yeah, I understand what you're asking. I don't know the answer if there's any other way to remedy it.
Yeah,
Whether the
I think
person
what
can
the
submit
county
another ballot.
what the county clerk would do is sign that person up for the permanently disabled voter list, and they would just send them a ballot.
So they could re-vote, so to speak, Dave? Is that
Well,
what
I
you're
don't,
saying?
you know, if there were time, if it were within 3 or 4 weeks, I forget what the deadline is for sending out an absentee ballot. Yep, they could do it that way. They
But if
could,
they've already sent it in with a mistake on it, then the question becomes how do they rectify that?
yeah, they would have to have a way to cancel that ballot.
Yeah. So I don't know the answer to that. And unfortunately, we're not going to need an answer to that because that one's not going to pass anyway. So
Oh, okay.
this time. This
I won't
time.
worry about it then.
Sadly. Any other questions about?
This is kind of in the weeds a bit, but when
Uh-huh.
you were talking about the county clerk's stuff on that, you said there were a number of county clerk issues. One of the ones that really sticks in the craw of all county clerks, I think, was what they did with the Safe at Home program.
Mm.
If you know about what that is, if you're a battered spouse or child or whatever, you can apply to the state and be enlisted in this safe at home thing where you don't have to show, you show your card instead of your ID. And then when they changed the voter laws a few years ago to require photo IDs, they forgot to exclude the safe at home cards. And so somebody shows up with a safe at home card and they have to show their photo ID in order to vote, which is like completely it's just the opposite of what was meant by the safe at home law. And I don't know if they've cleaned that up or not. They didn't the last time they had an opportunity, and I don't know if it's on the list this time.
You know, I don't, the summary of that omnibus bill is about 3 pages long. And rather than try to read through it looking for that, I would like to put the link in the chat, Dave, to the summary.
Sure.
So
What's the bill number?
it's House Bill 126.
I can go find that. You don't have to worry about that now.
I just found it and stuck it in there, so you can look. I don't see on a quick scan, I don't see anything that would remedy that problem, but I may have missed it. So okay. Yeah, very often when people are making laws about processes that are very specific, they don't understand the ramifications of certain changes going down the line. So, unintended consequences sometimes. Well, I just want to mention the SAVE Act. I'm sure almost everyone, if not everyone on this call, is familiar with this, so I won't go through a lot of details, but I did want to point out that the SAVE Act has passed the U.S. House of Representatives. It creates onerous documentation requirements for anyone who wants to register to vote or to change their address. They would literally have to go in person to an election authority with proof of or documentation of citizenship, and it's creates a lot of people. It would make it very difficult, if not impossible, for a lot of people to vote. The main group that are particularly vulnerable are women who've ever had a name change, but it's not only that. And I'll give a couple of examples. Some states, like when our daughter lived in California, they pretty much do universal mail-in ballot. If you get a California driver's license, you're automatically registered to vote, and that means that you automatically receive a ballot in the mail for any given election. All of that would be halted because you would have to, in order to register, it couldn't be automatic. It couldn't even be done at the license bureau anymore. You would have to go to, if you think about it in Missouri terms, I don't know if you, and how many of the women on this call have gotten their real ID and all the paperwork that was involved in that? Yeah. So you go and you stand in line and you have to have like 14 different kinds of proof of who you are and where you live. And then last time I went, there was a woman in front of me who said she was back the third time, and she waited in line for like an hour. It was her third visit because she never could get just everything all together that they kept demanding for that. Okay, so you go through that to get your real ID, and then you have to go to the county clerk's office and go through it all again to register to vote. So think about that. How many people are going to drop out between point A and point B? In Missouri, the driver's license bureaus have to offer voter registration to anyone who's moving to the state, getting their new driver's license, or actually anyone who's even renewing their driver's license. They wouldn't be able to do that anymore. So it would really affect a lot of people, not just women who've changed their names, but there are an awfully lot of women who have changed their names. There's no demonstrated need for these requirements. I mean, there's no proven incidence of illegal voting by non-citizens. And the act itself is very vague in terms of what would constitute proof of citizenship. So there would be, and then even if it passed with that rather vague language, then each state and local election authority would have to figure out how to implement it and what their procedures are going to be. And I mean, it would create a great deal of problem for an awfully lot of people.
Marie,
Yes, uh-huh.
first thing, the SAVE Act's been passed by the House, but it has to get 60 votes in the Senate. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so there is some hope there.
There
Also,
is some hope, yeah.
secondly, I did see a hand by Ruth, and I wonder if that was by
Oh.
accident. The hand went
Oh,
down.
okay. I'm
Ruth, did
sorry.
you want to ask something?
No, thank you. I was just saying that I have obtained a real ID.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
I actually
congratulations.
gave up. I didn't get a real ID. I just have a plain old driver's license because I have a passport and I can go where I need to
Yeah.
go with my passport because I'm privileged enough to have a passport. And finding all the documentation for my various name changes through multiple marriages and divorces, it's like it would cost me a fortune. So I just never did it. But
You would think that the passport would be enough if you actually had it, but of course there are many who don't have that.
right.
May I briefly share something about my experience?
Please do.
When I'm sitting in my power chair, I can't raise my writing hand up high enough to sign the machine.
Oh, uh-huh.
And they refused. They said they had no way of doing it other than that. And when my real ID came, there's no way somebody who required a signature match would have accepted that. So I had to pay for and take everything back to get another real ID. I had to take the real ID I had gotten with all that documentation, go back, go in there and struggle out of my chair to sign it more legibly and then leave.
Oh, man. So not even accessible in that respect. Mm. Wow. Well, I'm sure there are many, many stories like that. And I'm also sure that while legislation like this seeks to make voting more difficult for certain groups of people, voters of color, naturalized citizens, and so on, it also has far-reaching impacts on a lot of other folks, disabled folks, people who've changed their name. So,
Mahree, Wynn has a question.
oh yes, when?
Unmute, Wynn. Unmute.
You may have mentioned this, or I missed it, but I think one of the big problems with this is that people might, to prove legitimate citizenship, they're told to get their birth certificate. And many people would not have access to their birth certificate.
Mm-hmm.
That was mentioned quite a bit in the discussion of this bill. And that's again why the question of whether it's doubtful that your signature would match your signature on your birth certificate. It would be the same. It would mean either the signature would be different or your name would have changed.
Your
And
name.
this is what you talked about. They
Yeah.
married and took the other person's name.
Right. Exactly. The other issue with this, we are encouraging our members to contact Senators Hawley and Schmidt and register your opposition to this. And I encourage you all to do so. There is a fact sheet on the Missouri League of Women Voters of Missouri website, and I can, if anybody wants more details, I can provide that. But it's pretty much, I think it's pretty obvious how this would certainly affect the League of Women Voters, because we would no longer be allowed to do any third-party registration. So that's one of our main activities. We would no longer be allowed to do it. David mentioned that it would have to get through the Senate, and I sure hope that that would not happen. But there's also still the matter of President Trump's executive order to the same effect, which, depending on whether certain states decide to try to enforce that on the basis of the presidential order, there could still be court action needed to stop it. So I didn't believe we would fill up an hour, but I think we did. Go ahead, Pam.
I got a notice that the court said no to citizenship for that bill but no, don't take me for sure. But I think I saw that on the Chiron on CNN, or I got a notice from the New York Times that the
Well,
court,
it hasn't passed yet, so I can't believe.
yeah,
it's
I know,
already
but
been
he had an
court.
executive order.
Oh,
Um,
so you think there has been a court case related to the executive
I
order
do.
already? Oh,
But
well, I hope you're right. I
yeah,
hadn't heard that.
I mean, it was this morning, and I killed my phone, so I can't look at it.
You wore it out, huh?
Well, no, I did something. All I could do was press emergency. And this happened to me before when I first got my phone. I pressed the emergency and the police came and fixed my phone.
Oh my. So they're used to that. I just put the link in the chat to the fact sheet that League of Women Voters of Missouri has about the SAVE Act. If anybody wants to look at that and use it for talking points, maybe. Does anybody else
Oh,
have
good.
any questions? Comments?
Mahree, do you think the local or licensed offices are really offering people the opportunity to register to vote? I don't think anyone's ever asked me about that when I've renewed.
I think that there is not a good enforcement mechanism for that. So while there are requirements that they're supposed to be following, as you know, in Missouri, our license bureaus are concessionaires, so to speak. I mean, they're contracted by the state to perform that function, and their employees, therefore, are not employees of the state, they're employees of the contractors. So yeah, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure it's
Their
enforced to
database,
different degrees.
when you get a driver's license, their database indicates whether or not you've registered to vote. So if they don't
Oh, if
ask
you're
you,
already registered?
yeah, if you're already registered, they're not going to ask you.
Okay.
Oh, that's good to know. I
Those
did not know
databases
that,
are
Dave.
shared between the Secretary of State and the DMV in terms of
Yeah.
who's registered to vote or not.
Right.
Oh,
If you're not
thank you.
registered to vote, they're supposed to ask you.
And if you remember, that's the sharing of databases that if that one law passes would require that citizenship be a part of that database.
Right,
But,
right.
yeah. Well, that's good to know, Dave. Thanks.
It's a mixed blessing, according to Brianna, because a lot of times the DMV does not enter the information exactly correctly. And then when they show up on the voter registration, they're missing an apostrophe or a letter, or they use their PO box instead. There's a number of things that they don't always do right that we then have to correct for voter registration. But it's all doable, and it's better that they get registered there than not.
Yeah. And I believe there's a federal requirement that that be offered
Yes.
when getting one's driver's license. So it's called the Motor Voter Act. So until that's rescinded, we have that in place. That's all I have, unless
Mahree,
somebody has something else. Yes.
Could you just go over the process for a felon to currently to get back voting rights? Because I mean, Missouri does allow it. I mean, and I don't
We
know
do
how
allow it.
states do.
And they're supposed to receive a letter in their, with all the other paperwork they get when they're discharged from prison, about restoration of their rights. But it's not restored until they're released from probation or parole. But at
I
that
see.
point, they should be informed by the Department of Corrections as to how to reestablish or to register to vote. But if they just, Dave, I don't know if you're familiar with I don't know what the local procedure is at the county clerk's office. If I come in and say I'm a felon, but I'm off probation, I'm off paper now, I want to register to vote. I think there is a way for the county clerk's office to check that.
Yeah, I don't know. I assume there is.
Yeah.
That's
But
if their
the-
address is still correct. They might not have email, lots of obstacles.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, hearing no other questions, I want to say that you have left us with a complicated set of considerations on this
Yeah, thanks for
topic.
scaring the hell out of us.
And also
That's the world we're living in.
that we're grateful to the league and to other people who are paying attention to these complications. And so we really thank you and your associates for that. And
I would add,
it's-
any one of you may become one of our associates anytime if you would like. You can
Right.
always join the league.
I'd like to
We'd
say-
love to have you.
Right. I gotta pay.
good.
I'd like to
Good.
compliment Mahree to say that she's done a wonderful job in following legislation for the league, the local league, and getting out talking points for us to use with legislators, and really leading us very well. Deserves a whole lot of credit for the time she has devoted to this.
Well, thank you very much,
you,
Lynn. That
Mahree.
means a lot coming from you, for sure.
You're amazing, Mahree. Thank you
Yeah.
for your work.
Yes, we look forward to hearing more from you, maybe on our topics next time, on this one anytime, of course, that we need to hear from you. So Pam, get up your announcements. Try, if you can, to limit it to about 10 minutes of
do that.
talking